Hi, welcome to a new episode of The Edge, and I'm your host, Cole Szymanski. The Edge is a show about topics teens usually struggle with. Technology has played a very large role in most people's lives in today's day and age, especially with teenagers. It seems almost everywhere you go, people are on their cell phones. If you look a little bit closer, most of those people are probably teenagers. Now, technology does have many useful purposes, but what happens when it starts to have some negative effects? Teenagers are 4 times more likely to be in a texting and driving accident than adults. Every day, 11 teenagers die from texting and driving accidents, even though 95% of them say that they know that there's a problem. The only way we can prevent this is if we all work together, put the phone down, and save one life at a time. Today, I'm joined by attorney and partner of the Chaffin-Luhana Law Firm, Patrick Booth. Patrick has been with Chaffin-Luhana for about 5 years now and has dealt with cases defending those who have been hurt or killed in texting and driving accidents. Well, first, I'd like to thank you for coming, Patrick.
Thank you, Cole, for having me.
All right, and so how would you say that these accidents start to affect the driver of the situations?
Well, I think one of the things that you see doing what we do in representing people injured in accidents is just how prolific these distracted driving accidents actually are and how serious the consequences of them are. And that's why I do want to say I appreciate you having me on, and I think what you're doing here is just a wonderful effort to spread information about how we can try to step-by-step help deal with this problem, because it is injuring people on a daily basis, and in some cases it's killing people. And it's something that could not affect people more than taking away the lives of loved ones or causing very serious injuries and damages.
All right, and then how would you say this would affect, say you get yourself into a texting and driving accident, how would you say that affects you personally?
Well, I think there's the obvious, any accident you get in is going to raise your, or if we're talking about people in this high school, they're in parents' insurance rates. But I think there's the other side of it, which is I don't think anybody wants to have that on their conscience, that they were texting, they were doing something else that is distracted, that could have been avoided, and they seriously injured someone. And it's those sorts of things that truly nobody wants to have to live with or deal with. And if possible, it's something I think we would all want to avoid. Yeah.
And would you say age plays a factor into the accidents happening and how the frequency of them?
I think the answer to that is yes and no. And it's one of the things that I want to talk really directly about is a lot of people say distracted driving is a teenage issue. It's not. And what we have seen is though teenagers do have a high rate of distracted driving accidents, adults have a high rate as well. And what a lot of adults have said is, well, yes, it's a teenage issue. It's something that teens need to work on. But it's not. It's a societal issue. It's something that we all need to be aware of. We all need to take steps about. And I think it's again, one of the reasons why something like your show here is so impactful, because it's about reaching not just your peers, not just your fellow students, but it's allowing an avenue to reach their parents and their family and friends and people in the community, because you and everybody at the school have a voice, and a lot of people that you know and a lot of people that you can reach, and to get that message out that it's not just teens that do this, it's everybody does it, and everybody needs to be aware of that and work on it.
And how would you say society plays a factor into these accidents?
Well, I think society plays a factor in a couple different ways. One is that technology has now become so evolved, it changes by the moment, and teenagers in particular are on the cutting edge. You are the first generation that really grew up with this technology, and because of that, you're the most technologically savvy. You get it, you understand it, you know how to use it before other people do. And because of that, there is a tendency to be using it more. You understand it, you know how to use it, so you use it more. And I think from a societal perspective, in a lot of ways, there's this fear of missing out. I must be in the loop at all times. And when it comes to the serious ramifications of something like this, one of the messages we're trying to get through is it's far better to put down the phone for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's far better to wait than to do something that could literally cause someone's death.
And then how would you say law enforcement plays a factor in here in not only preventing these from happening, but at the scene of an accident, what goes on there? Like what would be their main role, I'd say?
Well, one of the things that everybody should know is that it is illegal in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to text while you are driving. It's also illegal to do other things that constitute distracted driving, and that's something we all need to talk about, which is distracted driving is not just texting.
Yeah.
It's not just being on the phone. It's anything that draws your attention away from the roadway and away from your driving. And things like wearing headphones while you're driving is also illegal. And if a police officer sees somebody doing either of those two things, it's an offense and somebody can be fined. But additionally, a police officer is going to investigate a crash scene to determine if that was the cause of someone's crash. And that's not a position anybody wants to be in, is to be sitting there and have to acknowledge that this crash that was truly avoidable was caused because they weren't paying attention and had to read a text or read a message.
Yeah. I know now hands-free's been a bigger upcoming thing instead of texting and driving. How would that affect these situations? Would it make a difference?
Well, I think the hands-free talking is a good step, but what studies have shown is hands-free communication on your phone is not absolutely safe. It is still a method of distracted driving. And so when you see laws moving to hands-free cellular use, it's a good first step. But people need to be aware that hands-free usually comes with pushing a button to initiate it, or a voice activation to initiate it, or a scroll through your contacts to initiate it, as well as ending the call or pausing the call. And all of those things draw your attention away from the roadway. And anytime you do that, even for a second, can lead to a crash that really impacts your or someone else's life.
Yeah. All right. So, how would so if there was a accident, say it happened, how is that any different from if you're using hands-free? How is that any different from just talking to a passenger?
Well, I think it's a great point, Cole. I don't think it is. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of, again, about distracted driving. It's not just sending texts. Turning around, talking to a passenger, looking over to your right and talking to somebody in the passenger seat. All of those are forms of distracted driving. And expanding what people understand to be distracted driving is a real first step in trying to solve the problem. Because some people say exactly what you just asked. Well, how is that different? Well, it may not be, but that's because they both present a danger, and it's something people need to be aware of.
All right. And how should people that don't text and drive even be aware of this issue and be worried about it?
Well, I think it's like anything else. There are other people on the roadway that may not be driving how they're supposed to or safely. And that doesn't mean that you should do the same. If somebody is driving distracted, your chance of missing or avoiding an accident that they cause is increased if you're alert and you're paying attention and you're doing what you need to do to keep the roadway safe. And so though there are people that are doing things like this, you are going to be safer if you're doing the right things.
All right. And how would, say you're in the car with a friend and they happen to pick up the phone and start texting, what are some things you can do to try to prevent them from doing that?
I think with everything, and it's why hopefully people that see this and listen to this, appreciate what it is you're trying to do here. Communication is the key to the game. The more people talk about it, the more people understand, the more people have a dialogue about it. It increases everybody's knowledge, but it also allows for a discussion like you're talking about. When you say to your friend, hey, would you mind, can you wait until we get somewhere? or hey, if you got to send a message, I'll send it for you. Those sorts of things are easier to do when people are having a general discussion all the time about what a problem this is.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think parents play a role into this?
I think parents play a really big role, and it's for two different reasons. One, kids tend to follow what their parents do. Mm-hmm. They emulate what they see. Yeah. And parents who drive in a distracted manner have kids that are 2 to 4 times more likely to drive in a distracted manner. You see mom or dad eating the burger in their lap while they're driving. You see them using the phone. That's what we're going to do if we've seen our parents do it. But the other thing is, aside from leading by example, it's an understanding that it's not just a teenage issue. Yeah. This is an issue for adults, college kids, teenagers alike. And all of the things that we talk about of the risks that are posed by distracted driving are the same for adults. Mm-hmm. And it's something that adults need to recognize and understand so that they can avoid the same perils that anyone else would.
And how do you get people to care about this before it ends up being too late?
Well, I think it is, again, a product of discussing, raising their awareness. Mm-hmm. You have done a lot of research on this, and in talking to you before the show, it's something that you are very emotionally devoted to. Yeah. And I think when you read numbers, when you realize that 10% of all fatalities on the road came from distracted driving, mm-hmm. 500,000 people a year are injured by distracted driving. Mm-hmm. And if anybody wants to, they can go to our website at Chaffin-Luhana.com, and you can see the different distracted driving videos and statistics that are there that really shine a light on this. Mm-hmm. And the more you look at those, the more you expose those things to light, the more people have to understand and accept what the reality is.
Mm-hmm. Whenever you hear about like the death tolls of texting and driving, it makes you think of it's a lot like drinking and driving in a way that they're pretty similar, but it's just, I feel like the same light isn't shined on texting and driving as it is for drinking and driving.
I completely agree with you, Cole. I think that is spot on, and the analogy that you just drew there is so appropriate, because there is a lot of information out there that says that if you are texting and driving, if you are distracted in driving, your reaction time is the same as if you had a 0.08 blood alcohol level. Mm-hmm. It is the same as if you were drunk driving. People at this point don't see it that way. And what the transformation needs to be is, just like if you're at a party and somebody is drinking or has been drinking, and you say, no, don't get behind the wheel. We're taking your keys. We're not letting you drive. It has to be the same thing if you see somebody that is on their phone or is reaching for their phone while they're driving, mm-hmm. and saying, no, keep your hands on the wheel and keep looking. Because if not, I don't want to be in the car with you. Yeah.
And then what are some things you can do if you're in an emergency situation? Like, say you're on the road and you're lost, or you just don't know where you're going. What are some things you can do that way you're not texting and driving while you're driving?
I think the easiest example is you pull over. Mm-hmm. You stop. And I think that's part of this message. Going back to what you asked toward the beginning, it is that there is a constant feeling sometimes that I've got to be there. I've got to be there now. I have to respond. I have to be in the loop. And it's sometimes, if you just take a minute or two, pull back and say, wait a minute, let me collect myself. Let me figure out what I'm doing. It can avoid a really horrendous result. Mm-hmm.
And why do you think that these teenagers and adults think that this text is so important? That if they're late for work, they have to text their boss right then and there and tell them, instead of just telling them whenever they get there.
I think a lot of that goes to what we were saying with the change in technology. Mm-hmm. All of those avenues are now at our disposal with our devices. Mm-hmm. It has now become habit. It's now become commonplace to just pick up your phone and use whatever tool it provides to mm-hmm. you. And so I think we've all gotten in a little bit of a habit of, doing it immediately and connecting immediately, where really if you just waited a minute or two, yeah. or pulled over and did it, it would make a real difference and wouldn't change what time you got there or what time people learned of what your plans were.
Are these habits like easy to break, would you say, or are they pretty difficult?
Well, I think the fact that we have to do a show like this to bring the attention to people shows how difficult they are.
Yeah.
But the more you do them, the more you discuss these sorts of issues, the more people realize that when you're doing that, you're literally making the decision of sending a text or making a phone call over risking somebody's life.
Mm-hmm.
The more that happens, I think those habits get broken more.
Okay, yeah. And then do you think people take this seriously? Because like I said before, there's 11 deaths every day due to it, but yet 95% of teenagers know that there's a problem.
Yeah, unfortunately, generally when you see these sorts of things, it really hits home with them once it's happened to somebody that they know.
Yeah.
And what we're doing with our distracted driving campaign, where we go to schools and we talk to people and we try to get this information out there and this messaging through, is to try to reach people before someone they know has passed away from something like this. And the more and more we do it and the more attention that we bring to it and people like yourself take an active role in, I think it can help and make the difference and hopefully save lives.
Mm-hmm. And being an attorney, you've had to deal with many people and family members of loved ones that have been lost due to these accidents. How would you say these people normally react during these situations?
Cole, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it is absolutely heartbreaking to have to meet with somebody and talk to them after a loved one has died, and to realize that it was avoidable. It's something that could have been prevented, should have been prevented.
Yeah.
And it was because somebody was in such a rush, they put their own text ahead of the priority of someone else's life. And the family goes through all the ranges of emotions that you would think. They're distraught, they're grieving, they're angry. And when you're meeting with them and you're trying to talk to them and trying to counsel them on what to do with the finances, because the breadwinner of the family is gone.
Yeah.
What to do with things like insurance that they may no longer have or any of those things, to try to explain that this was all caused because somebody couldn't wait to make a phone call. It's one of the hardest parts of the job.
Yeah. And has that been like your sort of motivation to help take down these issues, is seeing those family members just all torn apart? Has that helped you at all?
Yeah, I think it's seeing those sorts of things, and our firm is a personal injury firm, and so we deal with a lot of these on a day-to-day basis. We see these sorts of horror stories, and to realize that so many of these are preventable. So many of these didn't have to lead to an accident. It really is the motivation behind trying to reach out and help people before they make one of these mistakes.
And I know your firm's motto is doing good by doing right. Can you explain to me what that means?
Sure, yeah. It's the motto by which we try to operate as a firm and as individuals. We are a member of this community. I mean, the people in this room are our neighbors, our friends, our family. And when you see different issues like this, where we have firsthand knowledge about how these happen, why they happen, we feel like it's our duty and our responsibility to go out and try to help and work with the community to try to bring an end to this as much as we can. And it's again why I just think it's fantastic what you're doing here, and why I was so glad when you contacted me to come down and do this. I'll be happy to spend as much as my time as possible. Out there doing these things if it can save one life.
And have you personally been affected outside of the job from any of these accidents?
I luckily have not been in an accident involving distracted driving, but I certainly have had relatives that were.
Yeah.
And it leads to a whole different element when they realize you're watching them struggle, you're watching them go, not be able to get out of bed in the morning, not being able to care for themselves. And when you realize that it was all because somebody was sending a text, and you're trying to counsel a relative on that. And it's tough, and it really hits home when you see that sort of thing.
And would you say social media, not only texting, because social media has been on the rise over the past years, how has that played a factor into it?
Well, I think that's why we are very diligent about saying it's not just texting, it's not just phone calls. It's anything that draws your attention away from the roadway and from driving. And the biggest culprits of that is social media.
Yeah.
And texting and phone calls are a huge part. But the ability to have all those different apps and all the different communications platforms right on your phone, where people are stuck to them, they're clinging to them at all times. That is a huge part of this, and it's something that I think people need to recognize, that message can wait. The Vine video can wait.
Yeah. So if these situations keep happening, would you say that the government could just put a ban on all cell phones while driving?
Well, normally those things are state issues, and so certain states have. Certain states haven't. There was a bill submitted in the Pennsylvania General Assembly last year regarding restricting just talking on a cell phone, at least a handheld cell phone. We'll see what comes of that. But it's certainly something that state governments can and should do, is look at all the different ways that these laws can be tweaked to make sure that people are driving safely.
And would you consider that an infringement on someone's rights if they end up preventing cell phones from being able to be used in cars?
No, I consider a right to be the right to live in this country. I consider a right to have a family and prosper. I don't consider it a right to have a cell phone and not, have to wait 10 minutes before making a phone call. It's the government does that and on a number of different areas. You have to wear a seatbelt. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think with all of that, depending on what the studies show, depending on what people find, I think they need to look at all of the avenues to do this safely, and of course, protect people's freedoms.
Yeah.
But do it in a way that people are safe.
Yeah. So stricter laws, you'd say, would help. So maybe keep having all cars convert to hands-free, so that way you don't have to text and drive. Would that help?
I mean that may be a good step. I think, like everything else we've talked about.
Yeah.
I think the biggest part is the discussion and the awareness. In my mind, there is no need to convert all cars to any way unless you first had the discussion, so people understand exactly how serious an issue it is.
And then how does this usually pay off in sort of the long run, or not pay off, but how does this affect people in the long run? Not only the people, the victims it happens to.
Well, I mean, we've seen firsthand, Cole, so many times. I mean, you get in accidents like this. You're a victim in one of these crashes, and it can alter your entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, it affects how you can raise your kids. It affects whether you can work, whether you can go to school. It affects your ability to do day-to-day activities.
Yeah.
As simple as bathing yourself, as simple as dressing yourself. And it's really 1 second before the crash, you were operating in a normal way, doing things in a normal manner of your life, and a second later everything was ruined, and you were just not able to do anything you could before, and that's something that was caused by somebody that it didn't have to be. It could have been avoided.
Yeah. And what are some of the consequences, like from a legal standpoint, of the person that causes the crash?
Well, I think there's all sorts of those legal consequences. I mean, it's, as we discussed, texting while driving is illegal in Pennsylvania, and somebody can certainly be pulled over and receive a fine for that. But certainly, if you are doing something that is reckless and you injure somebody else, you run the risk of facing serious criminal penalties. And we've seen it where people died, and the person that caused that faced very serious criminal penalties because of it.
And how have not only phones but Apple Watches now have been able to affect that you're able to just look at your wrist and text someone. How has that been affecting the issue?
Well, I think it's the same thing with the advancement of technology. The technology is going to keep advancing. As you and I have spoken about before, the rate at which it's advancing is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's going to keep happening. The next gadget, the next device, the next program is going to come along, and it's going to have the same effect that the previous ones had. And so I think the important thing to remember is no matter what shape or form it takes, the point is still the same. If it's something that you're looking at, you're using, you're paying attention to, or it's drawing you away from driving, it places you and everybody on the road in a real serious risk.
All right, so say someone does get pulled over, but what are some of the ways that it can affect the person's family, I should say, instead of just affecting that person and like the person that caused the crash?
The person that caused the crash's family?
Yeah.
Well, I think that when you see these sorts of things, there's obviously a financial impact. You've caused a crash, your car is totaled, your insurance rates are going to go up.
Yeah.
You may be injured yourself, but also that there is going to be a strain on everybody involved in your family, as knowing that this was caused and it was your fault, and that's not something that anybody wants to put any family member through.
Yeah. All right. So I'd like to thank Patrick Booth for joining me on today's show to talk about this very serious topic. In order to keep people from getting injured or killed in texting and driving accidents, please just put the phone down. It can wait. If we all work on solving this problem together, we can start small and turn those 11 deaths a day to 10. This concludes today's episode of The Edge. Tune back in soon to learn more about current issues that are affecting the lives of others. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.